Hello house lovers, another beautiful spring day in Melbourne. Come inside the fabulous Bonaccord house and see what's what. And what is that the hallway is now completely stripped, which means house lovers, I finished just this bit because there is also all of that. Well, not all of it, but a bit of it. Aren't you glad I shall never have to refer to the stripping of these walls again? Anyway, but enough of that. Let us go and see what I have been doing this lockdown in Far Q in our rental house. Let's go and see. Hello house lovers, welcome to Far Q. And there is Argentinian Fred Astaire to say, come on in and let's talk about furniture positions. And what we're going to talk about today is the nitty-gritty logistical practicality of plotting on the plans that your architect provides you exactly where all the larger bits of furniture and objets, i.e. paintings, go, so that you can plan where the PowerPoints and data points have to go in advance. Which can be just a little bit stressful because I kind of like to make things up as I go along. But no, we are here to sit down at the table and look at our plans and plan exactly to the millimeter where things can go. And I'll tell you why. House lovers, a little history. I used to work for an antique business, Lauder and Howard. You met the lovely Leslie Lauder and Mark Howard earlier on. I'll put a link to that episode here. And one of the things I used to have to do about every 3 months was rearrange the whole showroom of furniture. Now, it was a big space, very mid-century, very cool, but enormous. And we were able to divide it into spaces, and there was a couple of smaller rooms. So it's a very flexible space. But a lot of furniture. Now, I never planned it out. I always had in my mind exactly where everything was going. So I would plot where the big pieces of furniture was going. I would plot where large paintings and mirrors would have to hang. We would get movers to come in and do all of that. I would get partitions placed to create rooms and nooks and corners to be able to create mise-en-scene, all of which was in the mind. And there was also the benefit of a storeroom at the back. So I knew that any of the smaller things that didn't fit ultimately could always be stored off-site. Here is a very different game plan. What we have is our house plans, ta-da, and we have an array of furniture. 2 levels of complexity, I feel. First thing is, we are combining 2 households of furniture, which are quite different in taste. As you see last week, we've had a bit of a go here in putting things together, and it's working kind of well. The second issue is that we've never lived in Bonaccord, so we don't really get a sense of the proportions of the rooms and how things are going to work. And some of it is a new build, and some of it is opening up existing rooms. So again, it's quite hard to get a sense because you haven't actually walked through the space to get a sense of how high the ceilings are, where the doors might open to, what you can have behind the walls, blah, blah, blah. Which means you have to be really specific with your planning and allocation and plotting of furniture, because you've also got to decide, for example, where's the TV going to go? TVs are a whole subset. I've never owned a TV in my entire adult life, and I loathe the fact that often living rooms and houses are built around a television and all the seating is looking towards it. So that is not something that I want. And luckily, nor does the good doctor. The point being, though, that you kind of got to know where you might want electrical sockets, where you might want data points for TVs and speakers and computers, where you might want sockets for ambient lighting, for vacuuming, practicality like that, and also in the kitchen, etc. So you kind of have to know from the early stages where such things as big bits of furniture, your bed, televisions, paintings, etc. are going to go, so you can plot electrically around them. I would rather play it by ear once you're in the space, but I appreciate in this instance, that ain't going to work. I've got to be more planned and more specific. So how do you go about that? First thing is to get your scale plans from your architect or your designer, such as we have here. Now, what Julia has done for us is to blow these up to a large format so that it's easier to actually plot things on the page. The problem is, though, of course, you've got to figure out the scale, which then brings us to the issue of mathematics. The scale obviously has been blown out of proportion because the plan size has been increased by printing it in a larger scale. So the original key isn't valid anymore to understand what the measurements mean, which means we have to figure it out. So the easiest thing to do is to find a simple measurement for a piece of wall. So for example, This bit of wall here is 1.150 meters or 1,150 millimeters, or however you ought to say it. So from that and that, you've then got to figure out what the scale is in relation to this actual plan. Luckily, the good doctor is un genius, and he figured out the scale for me, which is essentially we times the measurement by 2 and divide it by 10, and that will then give us the exact scale to be able to draw it on the map. So that's what I've been doing. What it then gives you a good sense of is what's the clearance around pieces of furniture, how the flow might operate, where you might want to have table lamps, ambient lighting, etc., but also where you might want big things like your television or your computer or where your office might be, which will then determine where your data points and your GPO points are going to go. What you now need to do is take a tape measure and go and measure things. I know this might all seem very obvious, but it is proven very, very useful because we have to make decisions about things that have got to go, and you kind of have to make those decisions now at the planning stage. Now this, for example, is a fabulous mirrored commode. This is the good doctor's. It's an Edra piece. Wonderful. Super practical. But, house lovers, I'm here to tell you that at 55 centimeters, it is quite deep, which means that it needs a very specific place to rest its weary mirrored head. Now, just how and why to place something is fairly easy for me, luckily, because I can just do that. But the practicality of where it can go in relation to our plans is a whole different kettle of fish, because there just isn't that much wall space where you have the width, but also the depth to be able to pass through it so it's not protruding into a space, etc., etc., etc. This is a really vital stage because the space that takes, obviously, something else can't take, and as space is, it's not limited, but it's very specific in terms of whether you can have things that open or pull, what the space in front of them is going to allocate. All of that does dictate where things can go. So you have the measurements of your piece of furniture, you then use your formula, in this case times it by 2, divide it by 10, and then you get the reduced scale that you can then go and draw it on your plan to see if it will fit and make sense of your life. Okay, back to the plans, where you can mark up everything that you have just so precisely measured and converted to the right scale so that it fits on the plan. Now, the next useful thing to do is then to go back to the site, if you can, unless it's a new build, and mark out on the floor of the rooms exactly where everything is going to go, the bigger things, and just what the flow might look around it. Is there enough room to walk past? Will the door open, or will it bang something that you're planning to put there? Is there enough room for the bed with bedside cabinets? Or what is the space either side of the beds? And maybe do you need to do something that's built in because there isn't room for anything freestanding? There we go, house lovers. That is how I have been amusing myself these dark and lonely nights, deciding where everything's going to go and trying to figure out what the scale was. Anyway, I've done that, so there you are. Thank you for watching, thank you for engaging, thank you for hitting like, and thank you for subscribing. Take care, have fun, and I'll see you next week.